I love Organization XIII. I kid you not. I love Organization XIII as a whole. Just the story of them, the process they went through, and the final reveal. It was quite an interesting thing to go through in regards to the Kingdom Hearts series, in fact. But, you know, in terms of organization, a lot of people now refer to as the real organization. But me personally, I like the original 13 of Organization 13, you know, from Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories and Kingdom Hearts 2, of course. And then, of course, alongside with the story in Days. I figured in today's video, we're going to talk about a little bit in depth in regards to Organization 13. But what is Organization 13? You're probably asking yourself, right? What is Organization 13? Well, they're a bunch of nobodies. That's actually the literal statement. According to the lore of Kingdom Hearts, nobodies are the beings that exist after a Heartless is created. So if any of you have ever played Kingdom Hearts 2, you'll remember the process in which a nobody is created. First of all, let's talk about the Heartless. So a Heartless is created whenever darkness embeds into a person's heart. Whether a Heartless attacks them or darkness just developed within them. All of a sudden their heart is consumed in darkness, and the heart is released and turned into a Heartless. Well, depending on the person, should they have a strong heart, that body will then act on its own and become a nobody. Now, a lot of people refer to the nobodies as these things, these white husks, known as Dusk, of course. These are the basic enemies for nobodies. But here's the thing, they never really go on to explain how nobodies are able to attain a form, you know? What I mean is that how are some able to revert into a Dusk form versus being able to maintain a human-like feature form, you know what I mean? Thus, the organization. I mean, from like Zemnes all the way up to Roxas, they are, of course, nobodies, and the organization is led to believe that they are, of course, beings with no hearts. They have reactions and resemblance to that of a heart, but according to the organization, it is stated that none of them actually have hearts, which... And so the question that leads into being is that how did the organization first get formed? Well, the best way to explain that assumption is to go back into the beginning, being that of when Xehanort / Terranort in some cases was first introduced into Ansem the Wise's studies. Ansem the Wise trained him as a young scientist and stuff, and this form of Terranort, Xehanort, of course, try to keep up. It's hard to explain that little debacle, but anyway, Xehanort is training under his guidance, and of course he wants to continue the research on that of the darkness within people's hearts and stuff. Of course, later on, Ansem the Wise decides not to go into this, because he soon later on realizes the damage that he is being put. Well, unfortunately, due to this, the Xehanort, thus Terranort, overcomes it and develops the ability to where he can reject against Ansem the Wise, and thus form his organization. Before he forms the organization, of course, he needs members to fill in this gap. So, Xehanort chooses not only himself to be the leader of the organization, thus becoming Zemnes, he also chooses several other people that reside within the castle, from the different scientists, to the guards, to even Briggs. Thus form the first set of organization members within Organization 13. Later on, I imagine, they get, of course, from Lee to Isa, who later on become Zayx as well as Axel. And of course, somewhere down the line, which never gets explained, but somewhere down the line we get Demix, along with Luxord, Marluxia, and Larksine, and then finally, ultimately, Roxas. Thus, after the events in Kingdom Hearts 1, of course. Now, the thing is about Organization 13 is that their attire. They all wear the same thing, which is that of a complete black attire. Now, the original reason why they wear this attire is that it protects them from the darkness that would shred them into pieces, of course. And so wearing this coat allows them to kind of avoid damaging themselves from the darkness that they traverse into. So that explains why they wear this coat, but there's also several other reasons that dictate why they wear the organization coat. It's the fact that, you know, Master Xehanort wore one in Burst by Sleep. There is that possibility that there was a resemblance from where he was a young man, young Xehanort, of course, where he wore the black coat at one point. There are multiple ways that this could have brought up, but the original intention was that the organization was supposed to wear these coats in order to protect them from darkness as they traverse into darkness. And of course, Organization XIII's original notion was to gather hearts. By doing so, they gather these hearts in order to gather in one location to build their own Kingdom Hearts, where they will enter in and find their own hearts. Now, of course, by themselves, they would normally not be able to gather hearts in a natural state. In fact, by themselves, they can't actually do this. In fact, according to Kingdom Hearts lore, the only way they can release the hearts within Heartlesses is if they had a Keyblade. And they were able to get one. Thanks to the absence of Roxas, they were able to actually use the Keyblade in order to gather hearts, thus be able to create their own Kingdom Hearts. At some point in time, they decided to try to develop a new project known as the Replica Program, thanks to Vexin, of course, thus creating Xion. Now, within this project, they were hoping to create 2 Keyblades, so thus being able to double their efforts, double their work and stuff. Ideally, except a slight problem. There can only be one Keyblade wielder within the organization. See, Xion was created using memories of Sora. Thus is why Sora had a hard time trying to gather his memories in Days. Keep in mind, Days is happening after Chain of Memories and stuff, and so while all this is happening, Sora is within sleep, trying to regain his memories. And of course, thanks to the event from Xion and Roxas, they both end up getting this tug-of-war event of who is holding the Keyblade more. Eventually, at some point in time, they pitted 2 against each other in order to fight each other in order to be reign supreme. Roxas, of course, reigned supreme, defeating Xion, and it is led to believe that after that, her memories were completely erased. Not completely, but you get the idea. Thus is why Roxas wields 2 Keyblades. One is his own, and the other one is technically Xion. I imagine the black Keyblade is actually Roxas' Keyblade, and then the Oathkeeper Keyblade is actually Xion's Keyblade, considering the fact that the memories that Xion carried were actually that of Kairi's. Which I think makes sense, but that's just me theorizing, of course. Of course, it isn't until Dream Drop Distance where we get the true reveal of the organization, and that is that their original intention was not to bring forth their own hearts, but rather to cement pieces of Master Xehanort's hearts into these other vessels of the organization, thus creating the true Organization XIII. So it's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting. So, technically, Ansem, the Seeker of Darkness' original purpose was to gather the 7 Princesses of Hearts. And then Zemnes, the leader of the Nobodies, is to somehow bring forth 13 Vessels of Darkness. 7 Hearts of Light, 13 Vessels of Darknesses. Interesting, huh? Of course, thanks to Sora and them, they were able to stop both of these plans until, of course, up to Dream Drop Distance, in which everything kind of collides from there. But that is the overall arcing story of Organization XIII. Now I want to talk about the actual individual members of the original Organization XIII. You, of course, know Roxas, so we're probably going to skip over that. But let's go ahead and talk about the individual other members of the organization. Let's first start off with Zemnes, the leader of Organization XIII. Now, here's the thing. Why is he called Zemnes? Well, some are familiar with the ideal of realigning the letters. That's how Roxas was able to get his name. His name is, of course, Sora, but by putting the X, as well as rearranging the letters, it becomes Roxas. That X actually plays an important role into the Kingdom Hearts series, as it is known as a sigil. Now, that sigil in particular is used to keep track of the organization members. It's interesting of how a simple letter is meant to track the Organization XIII members. And so Zemnes is actually Ansem, with his letter rearranged into Zemnes with the inclusion of the X. But now let's bring on to the other organization members, shall we? So next up we have Zigbar, who is rank 2 of the organization members, and his original form is known as Briggs. Originally Briggs. We really don't know how this all comes up, but if you're familiar with Kingdom Hearts, you'll know And there's extra stuff going on with Briggs, aka Zigbar. But either way, he's basically second in command. Naturally, of course, the reason why he's second in command is because he was closest to Master Xehanort during Burst by Sleep. With that being said, though, however, he is also a second-rank member of the Organization XIII. I don't know what rank number he becomes in the real organization. I think at that point it doesn't really matter, does it? I mean, if it does, they never really given each of them a number. But at the same time, in Kingdom Hearts 2 and everything, he is the second member. Third member is surprisingly Zaldin, whose original name is Dallin. Zaldin is... It's kind of hard to explain Zaldin, but he doesn't really do anything in his normal stasis, but as a organization member, he pesters with Beast. And, well, if you're familiar with Kingdom Hearts 2, you'll know he was trying to get after the nobody that would be created if Beast was ever cemented into darkness, which thankfully never happened, but still to a point he tried. And failed. Next up, we have the fourth ranked member known as Vexin, also known as Evan in his original form. And he is a scientist, literally purely a scientist. In fact, he was the one that developed the Replica Program when under the Organization XIII. And thus he continued his project within Castle Oblivion. If you're not familiar, in Castle Oblivion, Sora encounters Evan eventually throughout his journey, and Vexin decides that he wants to create a replica of Riku, known as Replica Riku, or Replica, however people want to name that one particularly. And basically, he has the form of Riku, and his main purpose was to kind of throw Sora off to where they can manipulate Sora and have another Keyblade wielder within the organization. You see what's been going on thus far. They've been trying to get a number of Keyblade wielders, and so far they have failed. We of course have Lexius, who I really don't know how to pronounce it. It's like Alexi. I have no idea how to pronounce this name, and I don't think they've ever mentioned it. If they have, I never heard it, so I don't know the proper pronunciation, so please forgive me on this. But he doesn't really play any significant role within Organization, from what I've noticed. I imagine he's sort of like a guard dog, thus he enters in with Castle Oblivion as well. And he's only seen with Vexin as well as Sexion in Castle Oblivion, down in the basements, of course, and stuff like that. So I imagine he's just a guard dog, or some kind of guardian, something like that. That's the only thing I got out of it. We then have Sexion, who happens to be, his original name is Enzo. And much like with Lexius, I don't know what his original role was. I imagine he was like, sort of like, I don't think he was second command. I really don't know. I've never really thought of that. He's mostly known as the Cloak Schemer. So I imagine he has the ability to kind of like scheme plans and stuff, which really doesn't make sense for Enzo when he materializes and stuff. So I don't see anything about that. But next to that, we have Saïx. Saïx actually plays a little bit of a heavier role, as he's in charge of Organization XIII task management. Basically, in days, he basically assigned tasks to the other organization members of what they are to do. He's relatively close right next to that of Zemnes, and thus whatever task is given to Saïx then gives to the other members of the organization as to what they are to do. So, there's that. That's interesting. And it makes sense because in his material form, Isa, he's more of the brains of the outfit. So, therefore, it makes sense for why Saïx would be the one to task management the organization in order to defer as to which task is best suited for which member of the organization. We then, of course, have Axel, who is also known as Lee. Now, Axel, he is literally an assassin. Why? Simple put, because of what happens in Chain of Memories. He was tasked to assassinate that of Marluxia, in case Marluxia decides to defect against the organization, which we'll discuss later on. He is also tasked in order to recruit Roxas again, and should Roxas fail to be able to join the organization, he is unfortunately tasked to ultimately destroy Roxas, which Axel repeatedly hated to do. We then have Demix, and Demix definitely... he's kind of the lazy boy of the group from the way he acts. All he wants to do is play with his strings. That's it. He wants to play with his guitar, and that's all he wants to do. Any form of other task, he felt like he doesn't really have the ability to perform the task that is needed to be performed. He acts this way throughout Kingdom Hearts 2 every single time he comes across Sora. And of course, naturally, he doesn't really do much of anything until he finally decides to fight. Which, I'm not gonna lie, he was pretty tough in some points. We then have Luxord, who happens to be... we really don't know his real name, do we? Aside from Demix, Luxord we really don't know either. It's still kind of a mystery for us. His task is, well, as it turns out in Kingdom Hearts 2, his task is mostly to gather hearts. Thanks to the events of Sora trying to fight off against the Heartless and stuff like that. He is just gathering the hearts and sending them off to Kingdom Hearts and stuff. He also loves to play mind games. Games in Genuine and stuff like that. And really, that's Luxord to a T. Next off, we have Marluxia. And really, his main task was more towards Castle Oblivion. He was in charge of the overhead of what was going on in Castle Oblivion. However, though, it was also him that wanted to defend against the organization in order to control it entirely. Which is weird, considering the fact that his original form, Lemarium, definitely doesn't match, really, when you think about it. It's even weirder whenever you see Marluxia playing a part in the real organization. It really doesn't make sense, does it, you know? It's like the guy defected against the original Organization XIII, so why is he a member of the real organization? It still baffles me. I will still never figure that out. And of course, we still don't know what happens to him. I imagine somewhere along the Kingdom Hearts story and everything like that, we will see Lemarium again, but so far we have not yet. We then, of course, have Larksine, who more or less is sort of second in command next to Marluxia. She follows Marluxia much like how she did in her original form, known as, forgive me if I've mispronounced this pronunciation, but I think it's like Elrina? I think Elrina. I think that would make sense. But she's more or less the second command with Marluxia, and she follows Marluxia much like how she did in the games whenever Lemarium was Lemarium. Now, what's interesting about the organization is not only are the organization members and they all have their own individual tasks, they also have individual nobodies that contributes to them. With Zemnes, he controls the sorcerers, Zigbar controls the snipers, Zaldin controls the dragoons, Thyax controls berserkers, Axel controls the assassins of the nobodies, and then of course later on you have Demix, who also controls the dancers, and then Roxas controls the dual-wielding samurais. Luxord also controls the gamblers, which these gamblers also have the ability to wield dices or throw cards at random, but I mostly see them wield dices, so there's that. We also have Marluxian in Kingdom Hearts 3, where we saw him wielding the Reapers of Nobodies, and then we have Larksine, who holds the Ninjas of the Nobodies in Kingdom Hearts 3. But not just in terms of their story depth, but also the way you have to fight them in Kingdom Hearts 2 is what I really like about in regards to Organization XIII. I absolutely love the fact that each individual fight is uniquely different. From the original set that you fought in Kingdom Hearts 2, to the add-ons that you finally got to fight within Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix. Record, we did fight some of them in Chain of Memories, but that was through Chain of Memories combat. We never really got to fight them in Kingdom Hearts 2 original, but thanks to the Final Mix version, we got to have the add-ons included, as well as the introduction to the data bosses, which I absolutely love that. That is like my favorite thing out of Kingdom Hearts 2 entirely. It's just being able to fight the organization, all of them, just fight them and fight their data forms. I absolutely love that part. And I think that's probably what makes Organization XIII like the top tier brass when it comes to executing Kingdom Hearts 2. They're methodical, they're cunning, they're organized in a sense, in some form of way, They're very, very powerful. And in their way that they do things, it kind of shows it based on how they're able to orchestrate this entire group in order to execute a plan. And it's even more so when you add on to the fact that they only play a small part to a bigger plot point that gets later on revealed in Dream Drop Distance. So do I enjoy the real organization in Kingdom Hearts 3? Yeah, to a extent. As I mentioned before, it's more based on nostalgia purposes for the series, but it was pretty good nonetheless. But I will still always love the original Organization 13. Absolutely the best thing ever. Nothing could ever top that. Until Square Enix give us a boss rush mode in which we fight all of the bosses within the series, which I don't see that actually happening anytime soon. So anyway guys, that's just me wanting to talk about Organization 13. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think about them and stuff like that? Do you like them? Do you think they're okay and whatever? But either way, I'll see you in the next video. Catch you guys later.